So I think it's 1 o'clock. We'll get started. Welcome everybody, and welcome to the Outdoor Recreation Council's October webinar. My name is Louise Peterson, and I'm joining you from Revelstoke, which is the traditional and unceded territories of the Sinaiaks, the Silks, the Secwepemc, and the Tonaha people. The Outdoor Recreation Council is a charitable organization with more than 60 organizational members spanning the entire spectrum of outdoor recreation user groups. We work to promote and advocate for access to BC's outdoors for public recreation. We build bridges between the different user groups, our members, and represent the broad interests of the organized outdoor recreation community to government and to industry. And as always, I would like to invite each and every one of you to become part of our organization. As a member or a donor, you provide direct support for these monthly webinars and other initiatives, including our ongoing advocacy efforts. And you can learn more on our website. It's orcbc.ca. So as someone who's involved with a recreation organization, or it could be local government too, you are exposed to different risks and liabilities. We had a webinar that some of you might have attended in August. We were joined by lawyer Ryan Morozevich, who outlined several risk management practices that organizations can take to minimize their risk exposure, including actions that minimize the possibility of damage or injury, minimize the impact of an accident, and actions that transfer liability to the user. So today we are here to learn more about the role of insurance in your risk management practices. While risk management practices generally kind of provide a structured approach to identifying and addressing risks before they occur, insurance pays for the damages if the risks were to happen. So today we joined by Rachela Pollock, a recreation and adventure tourism insurance specialist with CapriCMW. She's spent the past decade in travel and tourism and has worked with many Canadian organizations and businesses, including zip lines and adventure parks, cycling associations, off-road vehicle associations, remote lodges, and more. And Rachela will provide a high-level overview of the types of risks recreation groups are commonly exposed to and the coverages that you might want to consider. So Rachela, I'll stop sharing here, and I will let you take over from here.
Sounds good. I will go ahead and share my screen as well.
And maybe I'll just say that we will have a Q&A session at the end, hopefully at least 20 minutes. So if any of you have got questions right now, feel free to put them into the Q&A box, and we'll make sure we get to them once Raquel is done with her presentation.
Louise, when I start sharing, can you just unmute me? Because it automatically mutes me. Yeah, it's very silly. Okay, let's go back and do that. Share. Perfect, there we go. All right, so, oops, nope, don't want that. Done, we want slideshow. All right, wonderful. So, hello everyone. Thank you for the intro, Louise. I'm happy to be here with you all today. I am from CapriCMW Insurance. If you have heard the news, we actually are have gone through a merger with Rogers Insurance, another large independently owned brokerage in Alberta. So we are in the process of changing our name. We're still working under CapriCMW, but in the new year, we will be the new name Acera Insurance as well. So you will see that referenced in the PowerPoint. So as mentioned, I work on the outdoor recreation and adventure tourism team. I work with quite a few associations, societies, DMOs, and other businesses too that are in this field. So this is me with a slightly different haircut and color, but this is me, Rachela Pollock. Louise went over it. I've been in the industry of travel and tourism for a long time now, and I sit on the team here. I really do pride myself in outside the box solutions when it does come to working with these businesses. Of course, working with high risk industries, you really do have to think outside the box and get a little creative sometimes. And obviously I'm in this industry because I love the great outdoors too. So that's a little bit about me. What we'll be going through today are a lot of hot topics right now in commercial insurance when it comes to outdoor recreation. So I will be going over severe weather events that have happened, specifically last year in 2021, and then common exposures as well to outdoor recreation industries. We'll touch upon rising premiums, which is definitely a hot topic for a lot out there. The coverages that are available to you, and what is risk management, as well as some insurance tips to take back to your broker as well. And also just an overview and the understanding of between the broker and the insurer and how that relationship plays for you when you are securing terms. So this map is quite sad, actually. This is last year's map of the biggest severe weather event losses across Canada. So combined across Canada, it was $2.1 billion in losses. In BC specifically, of course, there was the Lytton fire, the White Rock Lake wildfire, and the BC floods. Now, this does really affect a lot of the property policies and coverages that are out there as well. So it just gives an idea of what the insurers are paying. And the big thing to keep in mind too is that the insurance companies spread this risk across all of them. So every insurer that's out there, they all have a piece that they're having to pay when it comes to these losses. So the big question, which everyone always is asking, why are my insurance premiums constantly going up? There are a number of factors on this, but specifically in the outdoor recreation, as mentioned, insurance is the risk spread among many, just like in that map. So that's essentially why the premiums can go up depending on the losses that occur. We are still going through a hard market. So 2020 is when, of course, the hard market started in insurance. Ultimately, what that means is hard market equals less markets to choose from. And especially when it comes to outdoor recreation and adventure tourism businesses, that's where it's hard because there's already only a handful of markets that want to write these high risk activities. So in a hard market, it's really, really tightened up the options that are available to go to. One big one is fly-by-night businesses, which ends up increasing to bad loss ratios. So when it comes to insurance premiums, if there are businesses that are just starting up, they're just trying out, and all of a sudden they have a claim and then they close their business down and they decide, it wasn't for me, I don't want to do that. And that can happen quite a bit in the tourism industry. That will contribute to bad loss ratios, which in turn will affect everyone's premiums. We really try to work not to work with the fly-by-night companies. If there's a new business that does approach us and really want to, get a quote on insurance, we make sure to ask them, well, do you have your proper waivers in place? Do you have your safety protocols? What's your risk management process? These are all different steps that we want in place prior to quoting. So if they don't have those in place, we'll give them a list of what they'll need and we'll decline to quote until they have them. And we are slowly seeing markets open back up. It's very slow. Keyword is slow right now, but we are working with exclusive markets too that do understand certain risks. I'm really excited about a market we have exclusively working with us through Acera. With the merger, we do have access to many more markets, and they specifically are wanting to write business in outdoor recreation, which has been very hard to find over the past couple years. So what is risk management? Ultimately, risk management is understanding the risks of your business and then providing solutions to help better protect you from being sued. When it comes to risk management, my favorite line really is the insurers are going to look at the frequency and the severity of the risk. So they're going to look at how frequent and how often will a loss occur. And when that loss does occur, how severe is it going to be? And that's going to play into what risk management tools you can use, again, to help yourself from protecting yourself from not being sued. So insurance is the transfer of risk. It's transferring the risk away from you, and it's providing what-if coverage for your organization. Again, the big one, as Louise mentioned, Ryan did an excellent webinar on waivers, what they are, how to use them, why to use them. And I highly recommend to watch that one if you haven't watched it, or reach out to him too. But proper waivers and price is a huge form of risk management, and making sure your written contracts and agreements are all properly laid out too. If you're assuming any contractual liability, you want to make sure that you have that coverage under your insurance as well. And volunteers, I mean, everyone that's volunteering and any participants that are volunteering, they need to make sure that they understand the waivers and are assuming the risks of the liability too. Now, this one's always interesting to me because a lot of the time, people are always wondering, how does it work with a broker and the insurer? What exactly are we doing behind the scenes? As a broker, what is it that I do in order to get the terms for you? So the biggest thing I always recommend for outdoor recreation businesses is to choose a broker that understands your business well, and one that asks the right questions to make sure that they're insinuating that they understand your space, because you want to make sure that your outdoor recreation business is being understood. As a broker, we offer insurance options and we know where to go to receive the most competitive terms as well. And, oh, sorry, my computer's doing something funny here. Hold on one sec. Oh, there we go. And we have access to all the markets out there. So we're very strategic in the markets that we go to that specifically work in your industry. And we know that the submission is going to be looked at and top of pile. So what that means top of pile is when the submission comes in, we want to make sure it has a broad overview of your business, fully understands exactly what it is you do and explains it very accurately. We want to make sure the application is submitted and properly filled out for the insurer to look at. Turnaround times typically are 7 to 14 days. For a while there, we were looking at 3 weeks, which is way too long. They are getting better with their turnaround times, which is fabulous. And the more thorough the information, the better. So that really is what we're doing when we grab all those details. We're going to go out to the different markets. We're typically right now, there's 5 outdoor recreation markets we'll go to, and we'll have them compete for your terms and make sure that submission is really well looked at so that they want to work with you. So common exposures, events is a big one for a lot of organizations out there that are hosting events. You want to make sure you have proper liquor liability because that's typically excluded on your general liability policy. And if there are spectators, you want to make sure that you have proper coverage for them too. Now this one, if there's anything to take away or write down or note down, it's injury to participants. If you see this exclusion on your policy, question it and ask why it's there and ask if it can be removed. I unfortunately have seen this way too many times on policies that I've reviewed lately for organizations. Essentially, if you have an injury to participant exclusion, your liability policy renders useless for those participants. So for anything like social or competitive rides, for volunteers that are doing trail building or maintenance, you want to make sure that you have injury coverage in case somebody decides to sue you that is participating in activity of your organization. So definitely highlight that one. For directors and officers, also known as D&O coverage or professional liability, this is a big exposure for the decisions that the club or the directors and officers are making on behalf of the club or organization. And cyber attacks. We, as a country, are top 5 in the entire world for cyber attacks and fraudulent payments. I chalk that up to being Canadians, and we're very lovely people here in Canada. But unfortunately for cybercrime, it's something where it's just very, very common right now. And the fraudsters are getting very creative. For organizations like yourselves, it would be attacks on your client database. What information are you holding? Do you hold credit cards? Are you using a third-party payment system like Stripe? Those are things to definitely be aware of too for exposures. So for coverages available, commercial general liability insurance. So that is your main general liability. Think of it as the word general. So when it comes to general liability, they're going to generally insure your risk and they're going to note the exclusions. So the exclusions are what they'll have listed usually on your first endorsement page. What the third party liability does is it protects against bodily injury of someone else or property damage of someone else. So in the event, again, your volunteers are doing trail maintenance and building, they damage someone's property while doing so, this is where this would pick up for those damages. High risk activities, highly, highly recommend $5 million limit or higher. I was just speaking at the Mountain Bike Tourism Symposium, and of course for high risk activity like mountain biking, there is the recommendation of having higher limits of 10 million plus. Of course, there are higher premiums associated with that, but it's one of those things where it's not a matter of when, it's not a matter of if, it's when it's going to be claims that will come out. And again, goes back to the frequency and severity. And usually something like mountain biking, for example, can be very catastrophic for injuries. Tenant's legal liability is included it's bundled in with your commercial general liability insurance. So it's a question, is your limit high enough on it? What that does is, as an organization, if you're renting a hall, if you are going to a restaurant and hosting some sort of an event in a place that you're renting that you do not own or lease, then this is going to protect you if there's damage to that property from that event. Or bodily injury of somebody else, if you set up a tent and someone's walking by and the tent falls and collapses. This is the type of coverage that will pick up under the tenant's legal liability. And then when is the coverage triggered? I mean, quite simply, the coverage comes into effect when you're sued. You know, when you're sued is when, as Ryan mentioned with the waivers, they're going to use the waivers as the first line of defense to make it so you don't have to go to court, but those legal costs will be covered under the policy. So it's important, of course, to take steps to lessen the chance of that occurring. Now, endorsements. So these two endorsements, well, you can add on to the policy, the liquor and the pollution. Those are always excluded under your general liability. So for your liquor liability, you have to add that on prior to an event. So if you have an event that's including any alcohol, whether it's sales or it's complimentary, or if you have a third party that's coming in and they're serving alcohol on your behalf, they need to, of course, have serving it right. And you should request from them a certificate of insurance that adds your business as an additional insured. So if you and let's say you are working with Outdoor Recreation Council of BC, your organization is hosting an event and you bring in a brewery to serve some liquor. You want to ask that brewery to add you as an additional insured. And what that does is, in the event that they overserve someone leaves, they get in a car accident on the way home, lawyers love to name everyone in a suit. So they will name you, they'll name OREC of BC, they'll name the server, they'll name the brewery. When that happens, that brewery's insurance will pick up your legal defense costs and you won't have any claims on your policy because you've been added on theirs as an additional insured. Now, some policies actually do include liquor liability in your commercial general liability policy. So if it's not excluded, then it's covered. So in saying that, typically the premiums I found for some organizations that include it are a bit higher, but it really, really saves on paperwork. So as long as you're not in the sole business of selling liquor, but you can have 10 events a year, and in those 10 events, you don't need to contact your broker every time to add on liquor liability. You can just have the peace of mind of knowing that it's already included. As far as pollution liability goes, this is really important for covers of costs of some sort of cleanup due to pollution. So typically, if you have the pollution exclusion on there, you can add the policy with a 120-hour timed pollution liability policy. What the 120 hours means is that's how long you have to notify the insurer of potential contamination, leaks, or spills. So that could be from the use of equipment, if you are using an ORV to head out onto the trails to maintain them, if you have gasoline that leaks from a chainsaw, anything like that, as long as they've been notified from 120 hours of when it's been discovered, then you would have coverage for cleanup costs on this too. So those are two important ones to look at throughout your policy year, depending on what your operations are. Now, another one, though, this is a separate policy altogether. So this is not attached to your general liability. This is completely separate. It's called accidental death and dismemberment, and it's specifically for volunteers, directors, officers, and employees. The title is pretty self-explanatory for what it is, but it does provide coverage in the event of death or losing a limb or function like sight, hearing, speech, while participating in activities of the organization. So AD&D coverage is optional. A lot of organizations, nonprofits do see the value in it for their members because it is peace of mind over and above standard healthcare benefits. It is it's pretty low in pricing. $2 a volunteer is where it starts at for an entire policy year. So that's something to keep in mind as an option. For example, examples where this would be really beneficial is trail building and maintenance. If you're hosting a group ATV or snowmobile ride, you're acting as a volunteer on behalf of the organization. And that's where, if you got injured while doing that, this would then help to recoup some of your costs. So with the AD&D, it definitely excludes races or timed events. That's pretty standard for a lot of organizations. Now, the volunteers of the club, yes, are covered under the accident benefits coverage. So it's examples of that are loss of work, additional medical costs. That's what this would help recoup. Now, the key for this one is to try to make sure you have a very consistent volunteer log and a volunteer sign-off sheet. I actually just pulled this one off of the internet, and it just has simply, you write the name up top, the date, the description of the activity, hours worked, and the signature of the supervisor. And whether you do that with paper, where you do it electronically, I've had some businesses pay for an app because they do a lot of volunteering, and the app actually everyone just downloads and then they log in and log their time that they volunteered. So something like that is really important in the event of a claim for your AD&D. Now, another separate coverage that you would have is another completely separate policy would be the directors and officers liability coverage, also known as D&O or professional liability. All of those are under the same umbrella. When it comes to D&O coverage, if you are on a board of directors, whether it's for-profit, not-for-profit, and if they don't have D&O coverage, I highly suggest you run or get them to get D&O coverage, because without this, you are personally held liable for decisions that have been made if you are sued. So 2 million, you can get 1 million, 2 million, and higher limits, 5 million, 10 million for D&O. We always recommend at least 2 million. This, as I mentioned, it protects you as a director or officer from personal financial loss that may result from allegations or lawsuits or wrongful acts or mismanagement carried out while in this role or previously in this role. And that's a nice one too, because if you've left the board and 2 years later, someone decides to sue you and the board, well, the board when you were on and serving for a wrongful dismissal, this coverage will still protect you, which is really, really nice. As a part of some of the exclusive markets we work with, we have created a directors and officers liability coverage specific for outdoor recreation businesses. It's really quick turnaround time. It's a one-page application, and we can get you an indication of pricing pretty much same day. So it's very, very quick. It's just based off of your revenues. So this also does include a hotline, and the hotline is complimentary. It's included, and it's got legal assistance and HR assistance. So if there's potential for a claim to occur, or you're wanting to just double check what the proper steps are before answering someone or firing someone, you have this as a really nice backup. So some of the examples are, as mentioned, wrongful dismissal, harassment, failure to comply with laws and regulations, even misfiling a really important financial document, and now you're getting sued because of that. Your organization is getting sued. So directors and officers, highly, highly recommend that one. And it's a very good coverage to have. So good to review that. So there are some additional optional coverages that are pretty standard. I'm not going to go too much in depth with them. When it comes to property coverage, just keep in mind that property is more than just buildings. So even if you don't have a physical building to insure, if you have tools that you use or equipment that moves around that you use, if you have stock like merchandise or office contents even, and if these office contents are in a board of directors' personal home, you want to make sure that that coverage is properly covered under a commercial policy if it's related to the business or to the organization, because there's a lot of limits on your home policy when it comes to office contents or things used for business. So you want to make sure that that's properly covered. And even with the tools, we can put it on some sort of tool floater. So even if they're floating around and moving, it's covering for theft, essentially, which is a good one too. And another optional coverage, cyber coverage. I did touch upon this too. Cyber coverage premiums are definitely going to be increasing. If you have already had a cyber policy, good, because what we're finding is that the insurers are really, really valuing longevity. So this actually goes not just for cyber coverage, but for all coverages. If you're with the same underwriter for, X amount of years, for year on year, you keep renewing, you're happy with the terms, that actually helps build a lot of longevity that they like. So in the event, let's say your insurance premium, I actually had an example where a outdoor recreation business insurance policy went up 32% over last year. The revenues did increase, But when I looked at it and looked at the coverage, we decided to go out and get other competitive rates. We got something that came in much cheaper, and the rates and coverages were still very comparable. So I went back to that. I think they've been with the same underwriter or insurer for 10 years. So I went back to that underwriter and I just said, hey, look, like these guys are been with you a long time. They appreciate your coverage, but this percentage is not competitive. We were able to get this somewhere else. Would you be able to match it so we can continue working with you? And it worked. So it's one of those things where longevity helps. And with cyber coverage, I think as the premiums start to build, it's good to get in sooner than later if you don't already have cyber. So here are some tips just to share with you if you want to take these back to your own broker, or just to really get you thinking about the insurance that you have and whether or not it's working for what it is you do. So when was your last review or risk analysis done? So as the years go on, if your operations remain the same, or if things are slightly changing, or if you have an idea of something you're looking to do or put into your organization, have a risk analysis done. Take a look to see how that may affect your premium over the next year or two, or is it something you can gradually go to so it's not so much of a premium hit right off the bat. So definitely look when your policies were last reviewed. Is your broker asking you questions that show that they understand your business? This is very important, especially with such a niche industry like outdoor recreation. You want to be able to save your time by having the questions that are needed asked properly right up front, and then making sure those questions are what the underwriters that specialize in outdoor recreation are going to be asking. So that's one to think about as well. Now, this is a big one. With all those different policies I went through, your D&O, your general liability, your property, your cyber coverage, those are 4 separate policies. So do your renewal dates line up? Or are you having to deal with your insurance renewals 4 times a year? And if you are having to deal with it 4 times a year, it's definitely not a good use of your time or the broker's time or the insurer's time, because it's a lot of paperwork and a lot of moving parts. So if there's any way we can streamline the renewal process, I highly recommend, and it's a very easy ask. So even if one, is coming up 6 months later, you can extend one policy and pay for half a year so they all line up. So definitely make sure you're reviewing that just to save yourself on time. And the other one is to move it outside of busier months altogether. I work with a large boat rental company here in the Okanagan, and they had, when I took over their policy, they had their insurance renewal in May. And May for boating is the busiest time. They're getting boats out, they're swapping things. So we ended up moving that out to the winter months so that they actually have more time to focus on the insurance. And then in May, they can do what they do best and just focus on the business. Another question really is to ask yourself as an organization what you're all comfortable, what level you're comfortable with to self-insure. And self-insure is just a way of saying how much are you willing to pay? How much in the event of a loss or something that occurs, are you okay to pay $1,000? Are you okay to pay out of pocket $5,000, $10,000? Because that can be your deductible levels, and you can increase your deductible on certain coverages, which in turn would then lower premiums. So definitely something to think about on that too. Another one to check on your policy is if you have an aggregate limit, it's called, or sometimes it'll be shown as AGG with a dot. Now this limit, this aggregate limit, it limits the amount that your policy will pay in 1 year. So let's say you have $2 million in general liability and you have an aggregate of $2 million. In the event in, let's say, March, you have a claim for $2 million, you now have no more commercial general liability for the remainder of the year, because your aggregate and the most they would pay out is that $2 million. So take a look at that, see if it's something you could increase. Even with $2 million in general liability for higher risk activities, we always recommend $5 million. But if there is an aggregate, try to get it as high as possible, or try to get it removed. You can ask for the aggregate limit to be removed. And there are quite a few policies that don't have it. So if you don't see it on there, fantastic. Check your exclusions. And I think when it comes to exclusions, a lot of the time it's just knowing where to look. And you don't have to flip through all of the policy wordings Sometimes it's like 40 pages long. You do not have to go through it to find your exclusions. The endorsement page, which is going to be near the front where your coverages are listed, that's where your exclusions are going to be. Then they're going to have more detailed wording of the exclusions, usually at the end of the policy. So, and that will be a page for each exclusion. So check your exclusions. Of course, I'm more than happy to check them for you if you don't have the time, or just do a review on it as well. Which leads to, when in doubt, just reach out. Let us know if you are, or even if sometimes the wording just seems a little odd and you want to clarify what it is. A lot of the time it's really good just to know where it is, but then also to ask. So when you work with us at Acera now, it is the outdoor recreation team. So we're a team of 6. There's 3 of us up top. Zach, me, and Mason were the client executives, and then we have 3 assistants below, Vanessa, Danica, and Stacy. So even if I'm tied up in meetings all week and it's hard to get a hold of me, you have 5 other people that are working. And the nice thing too is these outdoor recreation policies are what crosses our desk day in and day out. We, even moving from Capri into Acera and Rogers, we all really pride ourselves in being niche brokers. So if someone has a strata liability policy they need to look at, I'll go and send that to the strata team. Whereas for outdoor recreation, they bring it to us. So we got a lot of time left. I guess I went through that a little fast, but this is me. These are my details. R. Pollock at CapriCMW.ca and phone number 250-869-3825. So I'm happy to answer any questions that may have come up or go back on anything that I may have talked about a little too quickly. I will just go ahead and stop sharing here.
Thanks, Rachela.
Hi.
So,
yeah.
Thank you so much. I think that was laid out really wonderfully and very clear. I'm thinking that there's definitely going to be some questions. This is usually like a hot topic when we gather with ORCBC members. So just letting you all know that we will be sharing this recording and Rachela's slides, and there might be a few other bits and pieces, Rachela, that you are sharing with us as well.
Yeah, there's a really good 2-pager on nonprofit D&O and just potential risks that could be associated. So that one I've included in there too. Yeah. Yeah.
I can see that there are a few questions. We've got one from David here asking optional property coverage. Are tools used and owned by volunteers, are club members covered if stolen, damaged while participating in an event, project, or work party?
Owned by volunteers or club members covered if so. Yes. So if the tools are owned by the organization, that's when it would be covered. So while participating in an event, work, project, or party, we could look into it for doing a tool floater, and then it could be that that yes, when everyone that is a member is bringing their tools, it could be covered under a sort of blanket policy. So it's definitely something that's a possibility to do. Yeah.
Okay, great. David has got another question. Does the aggregate limit only apply to the CGL portion, or is it combined with other selected options?
So that would be just for the CGL portion is the aggregate limit. Now, in saying that though, the D&O policies sometimes can have an aggregate. I looked at a large association's policy that ended up having club members below, and they had an aggregate of 5 million on their D&O. So it would be listed separately and per policy. So actually, yeah, D&O as well. Yeah.
And Rose is asking, please share your phone number again. So Rose will make sure that that you get, all of you'll get Rachela's contact information. Wayne is asking, we often told that we need to buy more insurance, but never hear that we have enough. How much is enough coverage? That's a good question, Wayne.
Oh, it is a good question. And I mean, it depends. How much do you think someone would sue you for in the event that they had a catastrophic injury? And that's the hard part about it. We never know how much is enough. When it comes to insurance, I think you can't have enough. But a lot of the time, I understand getting a $10 million general liability sometimes is out of the budget. So it's more is definitely better than less, I guess is what I can say in my diplomatic answer when it comes to it. For very high risk sports, you know, mountain biking, I mentioned in that panel that I was on, we were talking about 10 million. 10 million being, you know, the amount that should be standard across the board, but there really isn't a set price that anyone's ever said you have to have this amount. Now, in saying that too, if you are a part of the Rec Sites and Trails BC insurance program, then you do have 2 million on majority of your organization's activities. And what we've done is we've worked in some cases with insurers and said, hey, look, I know you don't understand what this Rec Sites and Trails BC is because you live in Ontario, but let me tell you about it. And they've got 2 million in underline already. So what we're looking to do is get them 5 million, but they're going to go to this policy first if something should happen. So what happens there is that you end up getting a better rate on your $5 million liability, and now you have combined 7 million in the event that something happens. So I think it's also just, knowing what you're covered for. But at 5 million should be, in my opinion, 5 million minimum, no matter what, if that's my long to short answer.
Thank you. And Leon is asking, is there a volunteer age limit in coverage?
Yes. So essentially, they do want to know if anyone is over the age of 80 years old when it comes to the accident volunteer benefits. So typically what happens with that is if you do have the log when you're volunteering, if anyone is over 80, you want to make sure that they're aware that the limits are going to be less. It doesn't mean that they're not insured for those benefits. It just means they'll get less coverage.
Okay, and Catherine is asking, she says, hello from EVDRS. Hello, Catherine. Great presentation. Could you comment on extra insurance provided or needed for nonprofits that get coverage with Rec Sites and Trails BC? So I don't know, Rachela, how familiar you are, because you mentioned like the $2 million, but then there is this additional clause that the province will actually indemnify, you know, groups for anything above that.
For anything more, yeah. And that's one thing I reached out to Rec Sites and Trails to speak with them more to get more information on that. Now, the thing with Rec Sites and Trails is they do have the list of all the things that you have to follow. I know one association was working with the chainsaw clause. So for anyone that's using a chainsaw, in order to be protected up to the 2 million, it says they need to go through a chainsaw course. But in some places, there's no chainsaw courses. So in saying that, it's more of a limited coverage that you get through Rec Sites and Trails. Whereas when you get a general liability and properly articulated, we understand what the organization is doing, this is more broad coverage. I love broad. The more broad we can get, with less exclusions, the better, because then you don't have to worry about that. And of course, you're not going to put a chainsaw in the hands of someone that doesn't know how to use it. But it's little things like that just to be aware of, that it's more limited for sure. Did that answer the question?
Catherine, just otherwise let us know. So David has got another question. This is a follow-up question. Do the tools have to be owned by the association or the business to be covered?
Usually, yes.
Okay.
Usually, yes. Yeah.
Great. And Candace here is asking, is there somewhere that would have a good example of a safety policy to know what insurers are looking for? Can you see?
Look, who is this one? Oh, I see.
So this is Candace. A good example of a safety policy to know what insurers are looking for. Any best practices, maybe?
A good example of a safety policy. It depends on the organization and what the operations are. So, for example, if it is snowmobile related, they want to make sure there's pre-trip inspections being done of the machines, that they're logging any maintenance that's being done, that they are making sure people have gone through some sort of course in order to be able to operate the machine as well. So it really depends on maybe if you want to clarify on any business in particular, I'd be happy to kind of say, or I can look for some safety options that's maybe a little bit more relative.
And Wayne again asking, are there any requirements for the training of volunteer operators using equipment? And you kind of alluded to that a moment ago.
Yeah, only through the Rec Sites and Trails BC. There do have a chainsaw a chainsaw note on there that they do need to go through a course in order to be covered for the 2 million. So if you have another general liability policy, chances are if you've let them know what the volunteers are doing, if it's trail maintenance and building, then that's going to be like there, it's going to be covered under that one. So that's the thing, just to know between the two policies when it comes to rec sites and trails, what is covered, and then to make sure you have coverage for over and above anything that's not covered.
And Cheryl is asking, why do we need such high insurance when we have a rock solid liability waiver release form?
Totally. So when it comes to the waivers, it still doesn't stop anybody from suing you. So the waivers are there as a line of defense for the lawyers to use to avoid you having your organization go to court. So the liability, I mean, even if a payout's done, because let's say you guys were negligent, there's a massive claim that's 5 million, it's still going to need to be settled somewhere, and that money needs to come from the insurer. So it's the waiver helps you because it helps your defense. That's essentially what the waivers are for. And it really is, if someone's doing something high risk or going in an activity, they are aware that there's risks. And that's the idea of signing the waiver, just to let them know too, like, hey, we're doing something risky here. Make sure that you're aware of that before you proceed. And are you comfortable with doing that?
Okay, great. Candace is back again with another question. For timed events or races, is there a separate kind of insurance?
Yes, definitely separate coverage that you can get. We do have a underwriter that will include it, which is really handy, because then it's again, peace of mind. You usually pay typically a higher premium, not by a huge amount, but it's still higher just because it's less for you guys and it's peace of mind. But that would be under a special event coverage that you would get for that. And I've seen it as low as like $150 per event. So it's not very expensive. You just need to know how many participants there are, what they're doing, and if there's any spectators as well.
And Wayne is just it's not a question, it's really just sort of like a clarification. And I agree with Wayne here. Rec sites and trails has advised us that the provincial government, and actually this is both for rec sites and for BC Parks, those that work in partnership agreements with the province, it indemnifies organizations working on partnership agreements for amounts in excess of $2 million. And they've provided documentation. Actually, I think that the ORC, that we can actually, I think what we are going to do is just to kind of make sure that we kind of communicate that out. So like watch one of our newsletters. That's probably the best way for us to kind of share that information. I'll make sure that I start to action that. And Catherine saying, thanks for the answer. Got a question from Cam. Our organization manages trail maintenance for 2 provincial parks. We have no revenue, donations only, and no paid staff. We've 40 plus volunteers. Other than D&O and basic CGL, are we truly exposed if a biking, hiking, horseback riding accident happens?
Trail maintenance for the 2 provincial parks. With your CGL, that's what would pick up in the event of a bodily injury claim, and you're looped in on the suit. So they would say, what's an example I can think of here? If someone is out hiking, they trip over a log, and then they decide to lawyer up, and then they name you as the association in the suit because you were the one that maintained it. Your CGL is what will respond to that. So that's the purpose of having it. So we would want to make sure, again, to check the exclusions and see what if anything is excluded, and then see about the general aggregate limits. But the CGL is essentially what you need. The only other thing really would be if you would want the AD&D coverage for your volunteers, and that would be, again, in the event that they're hurt, it will help with loss of income and is accident benefits. So really, yeah, as long as your CGL is solid and the exclusions aren't anything major, then yes, it should be okay. Yeah, we'd want to review it for sure.
And Rose has got another question for you. She's asking, can you review Backcountry Horseman of BC's safety plan for volunteers, as well as our safety plans for group rides? So maybe that's something that you and Rose can discuss. So Rose, I'll make sure that you get Rachela's email address and you can discuss further.
Yeah, please do.
A question here from Rick. Race insurance. We buy extra insurance for each race and are required to limit entrance to our society's members. Is this normal for the insurance industry? Rick Martinson.
Rick. Thank you. It keeps, maybe if I go down. Oh, I see what it's doing. I was just wanting to see the way that you, Rick, where are you? Rose, there we go. Limit entrance to our society's members. Quite a limit entrance to society members is normal. No, I don't think it, well, I don't think anything in insurance is normal, but when it comes to race insurance, there could be a higher risk if it's public versus in your society, but there definitely is coverage for public events. So I would go back to your broker and just say, hey, look, like we want to open this up to the public. Can we get a quote on public? And you just basically will say how many participants there are going to be. And you could even do, I'm just wondering what industry it's through, like what type of race you'll be doing, like if it's mountain biking or I don't know. But yeah, it definitely can be done. So I would question it and go back, or if you want to quote, I'd be happy to get the details off to you too.
And David is asking, for those over 80 years old, and if coverage is less than below 80, how much less? And how is this evaluated? Does this include directors and officers coverage as well?
No. So two separate coverages. Accident, the AD&D coverage is one, and D&O is another. D&O, there's no limit on age to be a board of directors. You can be for profit, non-for-profit, doesn't matter. The accidental death and dismemberment is separate. What I'll do is I'll send to Louise an overview of the different age categories and whether it's an employee, a member, or a volunteer, and it'll say what the benefits are. So it'll kind of be like our pamphlet of all the different ones. Typically it's like 100,000, and then it will limit to lower than that based on the age. So I'll send that to Louise so that she can make sure it's sent out. I'll make a note of that. Yeah.
Great. I think we've just got a few more questions here. We've got Wayne Patton. Will you provide a link to the recording? Yes, Wayne will do that. Cheryl is asking, you spoke about provincial parks. What about on Crown land? How is that different? Maybe that was about partnership agreements.
The partnership agreement, maybe?
So maybe, yeah, maybe Cheryl, maybe you're, there was some talk about,
Oh yeah, it's only for rec sites and trails, BC, like section 56 or section 57. So building or maintaining trails. So in regards to that, the 2 million that they can indemnify for hire, you'll get a separate contract for coverage if you're on that land and a part of that agreement. And in saying that, it is good that they'll indemnify you, but it is limited on what they will cover. So that's why it's just important to make sure that the contract you have in place, you are very comfortable with that amount if that's your only insurance that you have. If you're doing things that won't cover under that, then you'll want to look at getting additional for sure.
Okay, good. And Leon is asking, is there a need to have other insurance when there are volunteers working on an official trail with rec sites and trails under our organization? Is that clear to you, Rachela?
Other insurance when our volunteers working on an official trail with under an organization. Oh, I see. Yeah. So that they're acting under your organization, but perhaps I'm thinking that they're working on an official trail. But they're working with Rec Sites and Trails BC under your organization. Well, yeah, ultimately with the insurance that you have for volunteers, as long as they are doing activities that are normal and usual to your organization, that's what they're going to be covered for. So I don't know if this is a question in regards to the Rec Sites and Trails BC coverage, but that does extend to volunteers as well. So whether you have your personal, or not personal, but your commercial general liability or the Rec Sites and Trails insurance program, or both, as long as they're acting on behalf of your organization, then yes, they're covered in short.
Oh, great. We've got one here from Murray. Nice to see you here, Murray. So he's saying thanks for an informative webinar. My question is, would there be any pitfalls to NGO groups receiving funding from their partner, local, provincial, federal government agencies to support the purchase of CGL, directors and officers insurance, etc.? Can you read that?
Yep. IE has an NGO insurance policy coverage, which was its financial support through the government funding, everyone challenging the courts and liability. policy coverage with was is financially supported through government funding. I've never seen that before. Essentially, if you're getting funding to help pay for your insurance, that's going to be more shown through your financial statements. But ultimately, as long as your organization is paying for your insurance, it doesn't really matter where the money's coming from. Because like someone else said earlier too, they have no income, right? No revenues. It's just grants and things that are coming in. And that's ultimately where you'll schedule in your business plan your costs associated with the organization, and insurance is always a running cost. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I've never seen that being an issue in courts. There's no examples of that, no.
I actually believe there was a little bit of I think there was a question about that at the webinar we did 2 weeks ago. It was about public trails on private land too. So I don't know, maybe that's where this is coming from. Okay. So let's see, David, who qualifies as an acceptable, suitable chainsaw power tool use trainer and instructor? Is there like a list? Is it BC Forest Safety Council only, or and then he's saying that BC Parks does training for park volunteers as well.
The one, do I have it up? No, I don't have it open right now in front of me, but one of the contracts I saw, actually, we screenshotted what the wording was for the insurance program through RSTBC. So I can just send that, or at least, because I can't remember off the top of my head. So I'll put that in my email to Louise as well for what that requirement was. And I do believe that the one organization was pushing back on rec sites just to say, hey, like this isn't, like, can we basically get this removed is what they were trying to do. So it'll be interesting if that does go forward in the future. But yeah, I can find that out for you.
Thank you. And Rose is asking, is there a discount for longevity with a broker as well as not having any claims? Can you expect a discount? No claims.
Yeah, the no claims and zero losses always is built in. And that's why it's one of the main questions you're always asked. It's always going to be built in for a lower premium. If there is a claim, they potentially could deny you coverage altogether or charge something very, very high because you've had a claim. So it's not something where you see a physical discount, but it's always in the rating that the insurers use. Longevity as well. I think longevity, you got to look at it maybe not more of a discount way, but more of kind of like a way, a pull. You get a little bit extra because you've been longer. So if something really does go wrong, we can go to them and say, hey, look, this is a long time client of yours. They like insuring with you. They like your terms. You guys need to be competitive in order to keep them. And I think that's more of our responsibility as a broker, is to make sure that we're having those conversations with the underwriters.
Okay. And Wayne is asking, if an organization has essentially no assets, what is at risk by not carrying CGL? And that is a commercial general liability. The courts are not going to take our home from us, are they? That's a good question, Wayne.
Yeah, that is a good one. And so this is in regards to, okay, essentially has no assets. So the CGL, keep in mind, is for third-party bodily injury and property damage. So that's in the event something is going on with your organization and injury occurs to somebody else or property is damaged of somebody else and they sue you. So as far as assets goes, if you're talking property, that actually would be under a property policy. So the CGL is meant for third-party injury and property damage. So keep that in mind just when you're thinking of it that way. But it's mainly it's more thinking of what you guys do as an organization. Where are you guys? How at risk are you of injury happening to somebody else? How at risk are you of damaging somebody else's property? Because that's where the CGL is going to pick up in the event those things happen.
And Christina's saying, she's asking, do you have waiver samples that can be used? We're currently using one that was signed about 10 years ago, and much has changed with regard to the liability and waivers.
Yes, I highly recommend reaching out to Ryan, and he's in the North Shore. He's the one that did, and I've been using his name and passing it out quite a bit too for waiver reviews. He's drafted some of the waivers. Him and or Robert Kennedy is also well known in the outdoor recreation as a lawyer. Any of those waivers, there's actually some underwriters that will only insure a business if they use their waivers. So even if you got him and a lawyer to look at it from a very high level, they know exactly what to look for. So I highly recommend reaching out to him, because he probably even has sample waivers too that he can show. Yeah.
So Christina, I'll make sure when I send out this recording, along with a bunch of other documents, I'll make sure that I include Ryan's contact information and the link to the recording with Ryan back in August, where he talked specifically about the role of volunteer liability waivers as part of your risk management strategies. So Catherine is asking, I think this might be the last question. Our Excise and Trails reg officer has coordinated chainsaw certification for us and others, worth asking for contacts. So maybe that was just.
Oh yeah, that is really good if they are offering that, because it's a part of their wording, right? So that's their insurance program and that's their rules. So that would make sense if they have the contacts for who you need to do the training for. Yeah.
Yeah, so if any of you have any other questions, if you have any questions about the rec sites and trails or BC Parks liability insurance, like if you still have questions after now hearing from Rachela, like please send it to me. It's currently something that I am working on to make sure that it's really clear to people that are in a partnership agreement with rec sites and trails and BC Parks, that it's that you understand what you're dealing with and that you are getting the best coverage. So feel free to just email me. I think this is it. So Leon is just asking, this is let's say that maybe this is the last question then. Should we always include our waivers should we always include our waivers that do you understand this question?
Do you mean, Leon, when you're trying to get insurance? Like trying to get a quote for insurance, that you include your waivers when you get the quote?
That would make sense. Yep.
If that's what you're wondering, then yes, absolutely, because they want to make sure you have that. And that goes back to that fly-by-night businesses that we don't want to insure, because if there's no proper waiver in place, then chances are they haven't thought long-term about the business being around for a while. So definitely include it. The more information, the better when getting quotes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So can you just list maybe those, so it's like waivers, any sort of like risk management kind of protocols, health and safety?
Yeah, exactly. Volunteer logs, incident reports. If there is, like they want to make sure that you know exactly what to document in the event of an incident. And a lot of them you can even find online again, but we do have a couple that we can send out if you'd like. Waivers are big, incident reports, a completed application that has a really solid overview and understanding of your business or your organization, websites, and then it's different for the D&O, but that's the main ones that you'll need for information. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. I think we've kind of come to the end of our presentation. Thanks, Rachela. So yeah, for all of you, I'll make sure that I share Rachela's contact information in case you want to connect with her. We'll have a webinar in November. I'm still just kind of like finalizing the details for that. So I'll make sure I'll let you all know by through our newsletter when and where and what that is going to be about. But yeah, you can all expect an email from me like in the next 24 hours with the recording and some material from Rachela. So thank you so much for attending this webinar, and thanks Rachela again. Really appreciate that you made time for talking to us.
No problem. Enjoy the rest of your week, everyone.
Bye-bye.